Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. JT Taylor. Dr. Taylor, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. I'm excited to spend this time with you.
Man, it's a pleasure. I've seen the good work that you have been doing, and I know you have been in education for over 10 years, maybe over 15 years, and you have been the purpose-driven educator. I know everything that you do, you assign purpose to it. And that is important. When we're on this journey to make a difference, we need to show up on purpose for a purpose. But before we get into the conversation itself, I would love for you to share with the audience who you are and some of the things that you are doing and your future endeavors that you'd like to share with them.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you again for having me, Dr. Cross. Yes, I've been in education now going into my 16th year. I spent 10 years as a special education teacher, working primarily with students who were identified as having an emotional disability. And then I became a Title I instructional coach. And while I was a Title I instructional coach, I also was pretty much engaging in education consulting even during that time. But after my time as a Title I instructional coach, really helping to move a school from unaccreditation to fully accredited. And we were able to do that. And for me personally, I felt like that was my purpose for being there, was to help that school become a more successful school. And so after we were able to maintain that performance, I went ahead and dove straight into full-time educational consulting. And I've been doing that since 2016 now. And I've had the privilege of working with leaders all across the nation, primarily on culturally responsive practices, how to develop culturally responsive schools, and professional development around those areas. But yeah, my goal is to really inspire educators to build competence and to increase confidence, and to help educators understand the power that they have when they're in the schools working with young people. And when I speak of the power, I'm talking about the ability to transform a community. So that's the mindset that I try to encourage everyone to embrace, us to be confident about your impact. And for me personally, I just finished writing a book that will publish on July 1st. My future endeavors, I hope that one day I might be able to work in academia at one of the universities, really just coaching and supporting new beginning teachers or leaders going into buildings.
Man, that's awesome. And to empower educators, the educators in the universities need the support as well, because to show up and to perform at their optimum, needing the resources that will help them is beneficial. So that space is always open. And I think with the work that you're doing in due time, you should be in those spaces to empower those educators so they can serve the students at their best. So, man, thanks for sharing your bio and for the audience to learn more about you and what you're doing. So I'm going to jump straight into the conversation itself. So I'm going to start with this question. What is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
Yeah, first of all, when it comes to your mindset, everything, as you have alluded to, for me, everything starts with purpose. So you have to have a purpose-driven mindset. And purpose is really defined as a reason by which a thing exists. And so I feel that every human being has to understand that you're not an accident, that there are no coincidences, that you're here on purpose. There's an assignment for your life. And you have to really figure out what that assignment is and allow that assignment to be your motivation and inspiration every single day. So I would say that you have to have a purpose-driven mindset, and you also have to be focused and rooted in that assignment.
Yes. So, and I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into what you just shared about assignment and finding your purpose. But when you talk to individuals about finding their purpose and they tend not to understand what their purpose is, how do you guide that person to realize what their purpose could be?
Absolutely. The first thing I encourage everyone to do is simply examine your environment. I say you have to look around at the context that you find yourself in, because I believe when human beings who have a genuine desire to be helpful or to be agents of change in their communities. If you just take a look around, you'll automatically identify problems. And some people can view problems as something to complain about, but when you're purpose driven, you see problems as something that simply needs a solution, something that could actually inspire you and motivate you. And so, for those who may not have identified their purpose yet, I would encourage them to look around at your local context, and you'll see areas that need help, areas that need attention, and maybe you can fill the void and help out in those areas.
Man, I really appreciate that response. And I know the listeners will too, because a lot of people tend to struggle in that area, finding what their purpose is, not realizing that, as you just shared, that their environment at times will help them to find a purpose because there is always something to do or something to solve. And if you can attach yourself to something that resonates with you, and sometimes we know we have the feeling that what I need to make a difference over here, not realizing
Exactly.
that feeling is just pulling you into what your purpose is. And,
Absolutely.
thanks for sharing that insight and reminder because a lot of people, man, tend to struggle. When you talk to people, it's, man, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So that insight, man, is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, it was growing up in the inner city and seeing all of the things that I was accustomed to seeing on a daily basis. I looked at those issues as I began to grow older, and I said, man, somebody has to address those issues. And so even when I first became an educator, I was literally 22 years old. I started a mentorship program at the high school in which I graduated from. And so that's what I mean by identifying purpose through problems. I realized that a lot of young people didn't have positive role models and they needed some positive role models. So because I saw an issue, it inspired me to try to solve the issue. And I think that that's where purpose really comes alive for most people. When we look at the world and we survey our environments, you're going to see a whole host of problems. But guess what? Not every problem is going to resonate with you on a passionate level. But those ones that resonate with you, that's where your purpose is.
Man, that's awesome. That is really great. A lot of people problem may be solved right now. They wanted to find what their purpose is. And I think hearing your perspective and how you can find your purpose, I think a lot of people now will find their purpose because there are always opportunities, because even the problems are opportunities for
Absolutely.
them to do something with their lives. So, man,
Absolutely.
thanks for sharing that with us. So, my next question is, what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Wow. Particularly Black men, I would certainly encourage you to do some inner work first, to really sit with yourself, examine your lived experiences, reflect on your journey through life, identify people who have inspired you, people who have encouraged you. Just spend some time doing that inner work first, because I know for me personally, when I look back over my journey and I analyze where I am today, I often think about the overall atmosphere that I find myself in as a Black man. And I have to conclude that sometimes the world doesn't want to encourage me as a Black man. It's almost as if the world wants to view me a certain way or attach negative labels or stereotypes or anti Black attitudes towards me. And so I have to know who I am first and foremost. I have to develop a strong identity. So when I go out into the world, I won't allow those labels and those attitudes and those biases to get me down. Because I know for a lot of Black men, sometimes they don't feel like the encouragement that they give is reciprocated. And so once you recognize that, you know that the work that you have to do is an inner work, is an internal work. You have to make sure that you're not so thirsty for validation and affirmation from the world, because the world may not give you that. The world may not ever encourage you or pat you on the back when you succeed. And you have to understand that. And then you have to be able to navigate the world that we find ourselves in. And so you have to believe in yourself. know that you have a purpose, know that you have value and worth, and then you have to start immediately thinking about a vision for your life. A vision where you can be more helpful to those in your community and those who are in the environment that you find yourself in.
And thanks again for such a insightful point. And you're right. Society sometimes will not encourage you. And some of us may grow up in an environment where we don't have that positive role model
Mhm.
immediately around us. And it
Yeah,
goes back to what you had shared earlier. After you had finished school, you realized that the young men in your community did not have positive role models, and you decided that you're going to start the mentoring. But you also share, which I believe is very, very important when it comes to us and thinking about change, is to do that inner work and
yes,
know who we are is important, and make sure we don't allow society to put labels on us that will not reflect a more positive image of who we are.
absolutely.
And I think that is really critical when we're thinking about being our best self and making positive change. But you shared something that I want to hear a little bit more about, strong identity.
Mm.
How do we develop that strong identity?
Oh man, I'm so glad you asked because in my book is titled Becoming Culturally Responsive Educators, but I designed the book to really serve as a framework to help people on their journey to become a culturally responsive educator. So I've identified 5 steps in the framework. Well, the first step of the process is developing historical awareness.
Okay.
And historical awareness for me is about understanding how the past shapes the current reality that we find ourselves in. And so in the book, I explain how my identity formation as a young person really accelerated on accident one day. I was flipping through the channels on my television, and I saw this story about Timbuktu. I mean, it was like Timbuktu was one of the first universities in the world, and it happened to be centered in Africa. Well, when I heard that, I was actually shocked, and I experienced cognitive dissonance because up until that point, I had never heard of Timbuktu. No teacher or educator had ever exposed me to this university that was founded in Africa, and how amazing of a learning institution it was. And so that historical awareness made me curious. I said, what other great things have Black people done that I'm not aware of? And so that put me on this journey where I started reading biographies from African American leaders and African leaders, individuals in the past who have done tremendous things. And so that historical awareness helped me find identity, because up until that point, I didn't see myself as a scholar. In fact, I had never met an African American male who had a doctorate degree until I was working in education as an educator. So my entire upbringing as a young person, I had never seen a Black male scholar in person. And so those are the things that we have to pay attention to, because representation is that powerful. When you see it, then it becomes real for you. But if you never see it, you don't know it exists. So when I saw the episode on, I believe it was the History Channel, talking about Timbuktu, I said, oh man, Black people have been scholars for a long time. And so those things helped me to develop my identity. And I encourage everyone to develop historical awareness, read things from the past, and see how they have shaped the time that we're living in. Because Black brilliance is not a new concept. It's been around for a very long time. We just may be unfamiliar to it because we haven't been exposed to it.
And thank you for sharing such powerful insight. And you're right in regards to that, developing that strong identity and learning about what we have accomplished. And I
Yes,
think that's where the power is. And I think that's one of the things that have been suppressed, to what I would say, to make us think we are less than, because that's where the inferiority complex comes in. Because if you don't know, you're going to
absolutely.
think you are what the narrative says, the
Absolutely.
negative labels, the stereotypes, and stuff like that. But once you become aware, man, you become unstoppable, because now
Absolutely.
I know that we're coming from greatness. I know that
Absolutely.
we have done great things. And you're right. So that historical awareness, or just
Hmm.
becoming knowledgeable of people before us who have
Yes.
been successful,
Yes.
really empowers us. And I'm really glad that you shared that, because again, there are listeners who they may be aware of Timbuktu, the university, and they may be no more aware of Black excellence and the great things that Black people have done. But there are still some people who are not aware. And
Absolutely.
it really will give them that spark
Yeah.
to go deeper into what will empower them as well. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you
and
sharing.
Dr. Cross, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to piggyback off of that just for a moment
Yeah,
because when I was in education, working in the public school sector, I worked in the secondary sector. So I'm working with high school students, but very few of my students in high school understood Timbuktu. Very few of my students understood or have been exposed to like African American scientists because in the state of Virginia, where I was working, there were no requirements in the SOL curriculum to expose students to African American scientists. So that means that it is possible for a young person to go through the entire public educational structure and never hear about a Black scientist. Had the movie Hidden Colors not come out, a lot of Hidden Figures, a lot of people would not have known of the African American female scientists who played such a huge role in NASA. So again, I think the representation is so powerful for helping us develop historical awareness because young people a lot of times have not been exposed to that historical information, and it's critical for their identity formation.
man, that is so important as you go back to that the students may not be exposed to it. And that's why it's important that they have Black educators.
Yes.
And and if they're not Black educators, that's where it is important that non-Black educators are culturally responsive. You
Come
know,
on. Yes, sir.
going there and learning about what needs to be said to the Black students so they can be empowered.
Yes.
Because if they're not seeing themselves in the classrooms, then they need information that will empower them to see themselves beyond the stigmas, beyond the
Yes.
labels, beyond the
Yes.
stereotypes.
Yes.
So it's really important, man. And I'm glad that you shared that because educators need to know. And I know the content that is shared is not only viewed by Black people, African American. I believe everyone does look at the content at sometime. So I'm glad that you share that because it will help even some of us as Black people
Hmm.
the importance of going deeper into what is out there about us that is excellent. So we can
Absolutely.
now be empowered to empower others.
Absolutely.
Man, I really appreciate you sharing that. So my next question is, how can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
Yeah, man, that's an awesome question. Again, I'll probably speak on purpose a million times if I get the opportunity. But what I will say is we have to understand that there is a narrative that exists first and foremost, and that it is not a positive narrative. And I have done some research on Black racial stereotypes and Black caricatures throughout history, and I have learned that there were racist tropes that were used to paint the picture of Black people as hyper aggressive, as over sexualized. You know, these were images that were intentionally used in media, in newspaper articles. They were intentionally used even in textbooks and in curricular materials in schools that found their way in schools. And so those images and those portrayals were designed to create a narrative that would make the entire world view Black men a particular way. And so Black men have to first understand that there is a narrative that already exists. It existed before many of us were born. And in fact, all of us today, it was a narrative that has been published for hundreds of years. So once you come into the knowledge of, hey, there is a narrative, then you have to understand that it is your responsibility to counter that narrative. It is your responsibility to demonstrate Black excellence, to embrace the values and the leadership traits that would allow you to change the narrative, not just for yourself, but for your family and for your community. Because again, images are powerful. And when other Black men see Black men in positions of leadership and carrying themselves in excellence, then it becomes attractive and they want to do it. So one of the most powerful things that Black men can do to change the narrative, or create a new narrative, is to live intentionally, to live on purpose, to develop a leadership mindset and a leadership framework, and to really demonstrate what servant leadership looks like in their own homes, with their families, and with their communities, and on their job. And by just living on purpose, you'll change the narrative.
Man, again, powerful insight, because as you shared, we need to be aware and know that there is already a narrative, and it's not a positive narrative.
Mhm.
And to go back to what you have said also, that we have to be intentional to counter that narrative.
Mhm.
Because if we don't change it, it's not going to change. And
Absolutely.
what I like to say is that we can't wait on someone to do for us what we need to do for ourselves. Because
Yes,
if
sir.
if it was going to change by any other people other than us, it would already been changed.
Absolutely.
So we have to be intentional about changing the narrative. We know that there is something negative about us that exists, and it
Mhm.
was intentional, created, socially engineered for us to see ourselves in a negative light and for the
Absolutely.
world to see us in a negative light.
Mhm.
So if we want to change that, we have to change it. And
Yes.
it's something that as men, as Black men, we have to realize that it's on us to
Mhm.
really show up in the world, wherever it is, in our home, in our community, wherever we are, in our work environment, to counter that narrative. We
Mhm.
cannot say that's what's out there and that's what they say about us. We have to decide that we're going to change the narrative, and we have to be
Absolutely.
intentional every single day.
Absolutely.
It can be sometimes seems as a burden on us as Black men to say to men, we need to show up like this. We need to
Yeah.
be different from what society says about us. But we have to realize that even our ancestors have to do some work for us to be where we are. So it's
Absolutely.
really our obligation to
Yes.
take the torch from where they have left off
Yes.
to make it better for the next
Absolutely.
generation.
Absolutely.
So, man, I really appreciate you sharing that point, and that is important for us to be intentional with how we show up in our
And
lives each day.
and Dr. Cross, if I might add to that, I think we have to understand that it's not that difficult to change the narrative. It's not like it's a step-by-step process that we have to engage in. All we have to do is know who we are.
Correct.
Once we recognize that we are excellent, once we recognize that that's who we are at our core, we can perform at the highest level in any area of life. Once we identify that, then just living changes the narrative, because then we begin to live at a higher level. Then
Yeah.
our values become at a higher level. Then everything we do is excellent and people have to notice it. I often tell people, effective people don't strive to be noticed, but effective people always get noticed.
That's
So
right.
you don't have to try to do something or be something that you're not. Just know who you are. And I believe that Black people are brilliant, have always been brilliant. And so it is up to us to actualize that brilliance and then reveal that brilliance to the world. And once we recognize that we are brilliant, then we can easily do that. Then it just becomes living. And every time people see us operating, they'll know that that's what brilliance looks like. And so I think it starts with us, as you have alluded. We just got to understand who we are. We're not those labels that the world has given us. We are brilliant. We were crafted, divinely made to make an impact. We're educators, we're teachers, we're Lord, we're so many things. We have to know who we are.
And that is very important, man. Knowing who we are is important. Once we become, man, aware, and it goes back to what you had said, becoming aware of our excellence will really override the negative stereotypes and what we believe about ourselves. Because
Yes.
if you don't know, but once you become aware, you
Mm.
realize that maybe I'm the one suppressing my greatness, but you have to become aware and be willing to show
Yes.
up wherever you are, as who you decide that you want to be. And
Absolutely.
as you mentioned, that people will start to realize that you realize who you are, right? And stuff like that. And then appreciate that standard that you set, that which
Yes,
you now start to hold yourself. Because if I came from greatness, then I must be great. So now I'm going to show up in that greatness. And
absolutely.
man, and once we do it, you'll find that you're doing inspire others to realize that,
Absolutely.
man, you know what? He's doing it. So I can do it.
Exactly. If he can do it, I can do it.
And
That's
that's
it.
the mindset that we have to have, because we have to realize that we serve a purpose on in this life in regards
Yes,
to us being the best version of
absolutely.
ourselves will inspire others to do the same. So it's important
Absolutely.
that we realize our greatness. And I had a thought that will come back to me because you said something that I really want to touch on a little bit deeper. But I was just going to continue the conversation and know it will come back to my mind. So, my next question is, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
Well, I have always been inspired by my educators more than anybody because when I was younger, I really wasn't a student with a purpose. I'll use that term. I didn't come to school to succeed or to excel academically. I literally came to school to socialize. School was more about fun for me. It was because I had to go to school. And so I had educators along my journey who would speak life into me and they would encourage me to really put more effort into education. They would tell me how much potential that I had. And so those were the educators that caused me to have an epiphany that made me want to buckle down and take my study serious. And so because of their influence, I wanted to be an educator. So when I became an educator, I wanted to be the best educator that ever existed. And so I always viewed my work as something that was inspirational because that's the impact that educators made on me. And so that's where I have drawn a lot of my inspiration from. But nowadays, as I got older, a gentleman who you might be familiar with, his name is Dr. Miles Monroe.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Miles Monroe has inspired me more than any other human being. I joke with my wife sometimes and I say, hey, it's Jesus, it's Paul, and it's Miles Monroe for me because of his impact on my life is second to none. And so nowadays I'm inspired by a ton of researchers and educators. Every educator in the area of culturally responsive education inspires me. Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, Dr. Geneva Gay, Dr. Bettina Love, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Christopher Emden. I mean, Principal Kafele, all of these educators, they just keep giving me pep and fuel to do the work that I do because it's like iron sharpening iron. So I find inspiration all over the place. Yeah, all I have to do is see an individual operating in excellence and making a difference in their context, and that inspires me to do the exact same thing in my context.
And that's important to learn from others and be open to learn from others, because it doesn't matter how much we think we know, we always need to know more. And sometimes even what we know need clarity,
Absolutely.
and for it to be as effective as we would want it to be. So great point in regards to connecting with people, learning from others who are doing the work, because it's
Yes,
important to connect with individuals who are doing the work. And we don't have to connect with them by knowing them personally,
exactly.
but their work is out there
Yes,
and we
yes.
can learn from the work that they share. And that's a great point, because sometimes we think we need to know these individuals directly, but we can connect with them via their work and
Yes,
to
sir.
strengthen what we are trying to do or trying to accomplish or the impact that we want to make. So it's great to learn from these individuals and make connections we can with these individuals who we admire,
Yes, sir.
whose work we see as effective. So that's great. And it's for the listeners, if you don't know the person personally, know that you can connect with them through their work.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for sharing that. So I'm going to go straight into my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Yeah, I think right now Black men are extremely brilliant, gifted, phenomenal, but we just need direction. We just need direction. We just need to understand where to put our resources, skills, talents, gifts, and abilities. Because a lot of times when you're growing up in adverse circumstances, which a lot of Black men find themselves in, that obviously poverty, African Americans are disproportionately living in impoverished neighborhoods, and so you're getting access to less resources, you're getting access to less services, those type of things. So the deck is stacked against you. You have to understand that, but at the same time, you have to know who you are. You have to believe in yourself. So right now, I think that again, Black men are at a critical juncture in life because they just need. We all just need a little bit more guidance. We need mentors. Even though I am a father and a leader in my community, I still yearn for mentorship. I still yearn for guidance because I think that life is not meant to be independent. We're not supposed to just be great and then live on an island by yourself. You're supposed to work in community. You're supposed to live in community. You should operate interdependently. And so I really believe when I say Black men need guidance, what I mean by that is they need a community. They need to feel that sense of belonging. They need to feel that sense of acceptance. They need to feel that sense of camaraderie and that communal vibe, really guided by goals and aspirations to make a difference. That's what we need right now. So I think mentorship opportunities, coaching, to be coached by someone who is a bit more successful and can a bit more mature, can help us in those areas. That's what we need right now. So I think we're at a good place, but we're at a pivotal point where we just need some guidance and some direction so we'll know how to apply our skills and to make a difference in our community.
Yes, I do believe that the guidance and mentorship is important, and being spaces where we have that sense of belongingness or feeling of that self sense of belonging. But you share a point that I want to go a little bit deeper in, or just to really expound on. Maybe not really a point that you have made just now, but in regards to Black males' excellence and the accomplishments of Black men, do you see more Black men now pursuing higher education degrees or achieving at a higher level than before, from your perspective, or the men that are around you? What do you see? Because I know when I started this journey, my educational journey, my doctoral journey, I didn't realize that there were so many Black men with PhDs. I was shocked when I started doing the research. I was shocked. So I don't know, is it the same thing for you? Do you see more men pursuing higher education degrees than before?
Absolutely. I completely share the same experience that you have alluded to. And I think social media plays a huge role in this because, as we've been talking about from the beginning, representation is that important. And
Yes,
so when you don't see African Americans, Black people in general getting degrees, that doesn't give you any encouragement to pursue a degree.
that's
But
right.
once you start to see Black PhDs, Black leaders in education, Black leaders in government, then it kind of gives you an idea that, hey, I might be able to do something like that. So I think social media, just by way of giving us imagery, just by way of giving us a portrayal of potential, I think that has inspired a lot of Black people to start taking education more seriously. And again, I don't think is difficult. It's just that we have to see ourselves as capable. Getting out of that deficit lens that the world has attached to us, that inferiority complex, once we overcome that and we recognize that, hey, we can be successful. Once we get to that point, then the world is wide open. Like I often share how I had a 0.75 GPA in high school. I was a completely failing student. But the epiphany came when I started to say to myself, hey, you can actually do this. Like, school isn't difficult for you. If you just come to school, stop cutting class, and put forth some effort, you'll be okay. And so I think that's the experience that most Black people who haven't pursued education need to embrace is, hey, you can be successful. You are inherently brilliant. There's greatness inside of you. And so once we open up that treasure that's inside of us, we'll be able to be successful in any domain that we choose. So I say all of that to say social media has given us images. Now I can see a Dr. Richard Cross on social media. Now I can see these examples of Black excellence on social media, and they don't seem as distant as it once used to be.
Yeah.
Now I can say, hey, I can do this because I have seen the example.
And that's important. Yes, social media have really give us the opportunity to know more people, to connect with people who are doing excellent work. So that is important. And my next question, I know you have shared about what can be done, but I'm going to still ask the question because I know you may have more to share about what we can do as Black men. So my question is, what change do you want to see in general
Mm.
and amongst Black men?
Yeah, I want to see Black men going into the field of education. I want to see Black men identifying education as a personal calling. I want to see Black men return to the schools in which they graduated from and say, hey, I went to this school. I'm coming to give back to this school. I want to sign up as a volunteer, as an athletic coach, as a educator, as an assistant principal or principal. I want to see Black men going into education because I often think about my experience as a Black male in education from a student perspective. I only had one Black male teacher my entire educational public school career. And that was my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Joby Boone. See how unforgettable he was for me because he was the only one that I had ever saw. And so I took that role on personally when I became an educator because in the same breath, I was a Black male educator and one of maybe two or three in my local context. So we have to embrace the calling of educating our young people. I think Black men particularly have to understand that that's a role that you must fill. That's a problem that only you can address. No one else can address that role. So I personally would love to see Black men going into education and making a difference in their local context by just being an example for the young people, showing them what Black excellence looks like in their academic setting, and always holding them to high expectations and modeling excellence. So I would love to see that.
And that would be great. But I realize that a lot of us as Black men, or a lot of Black men in general, don't think teaching is a profession that they would want. But once you get into the classroom and you realize the impact, man, it's like a great feeling.
Yes, sir.
So I do allude to what you said that more of us as Black men need to get into the classroom and make a difference. And representation matters, and where the next generation of young men can see through us what is
Yes.
possible by us
Yes.
demonstrating and sharing with them how they can navigate their way. And what I also realized from research that when Black men are in the classroom, it doesn't only help Black male students, it
Absolutely.
helps all students.
Everybody.
And and from the research, it said students actually do better from having Black male teachers in the classroom. That's what the research said. So, and that's not what me I'm saying, but they said when Black males are in the classroom, it helps all students. So the performance better, when we have Black males in the classrooms.
Absolutely.
So, but glad that you share that and serve as a reminder as well to the listeners, to the men listening, that being in education is a good choice because it helps the next generation to realize what is possible through us as Black men being in that space. So my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
The most life-changing moment of my life was the birth of my firstborn son. I actually was a teenage father. I became a father at the age of 17. It was during my senior year of high school. So I went to college as a young father, and I remember leaving every weekend to come home to spend some time with my son. And so that moment of becoming a father, a teenage father, while I was also trying to organize my life and get on the right path, the same time I had a lot of pressure on me. But I would say that singular moment accelerated my maturation process because I didn't have time to play around. I had to buckle down. I had no time to waste. I literally had to go to school, do what I needed to do, come home, raise my son. So that was the most life-changing moment of my life. That's what set me on the path that I'm on. And my son, who was a teenager, I mean, who was born when I was a teenager, he is now graduating high school this year, and he just got a full scholarship to study at the university. So it's full circle. But yeah, the birth of my children has certainly inspired me. That's the most pivotal moment in my life.
Man, that's awesome. Those experiences can really change how we think.
Hmm.
And as you mentioned, get us to buckle down to do the things that we need to do and can do to make our lives better. Because now it's not about us
Absolutely.
individually, it's now another life that we have to take care of, another life that we have to support, another life that we have to be an example for.
Absolutely.
So it's those situations really can change how we show up in the world, because now it's not only about us anymore, it's about our offspring, our kids, and the people that are immediately in our lives. So that's important that some people realize how important that can be, and to put us on that path to greatness, because now we have to be the best that we can be for those who we are now responsible
Yeah.
for.
You're
So
forced to be a
thanks
role
for
model.
sharing. Go ahead.
Oh no, I said yeah, because at that point you're forced into being a role model. So you either gonna sink or swim. You're either gonna lead or you're not. And so when you embrace fatherhood, it causes you to embrace leadership. So that's what I became immediately was being a father made me a leader.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. My next question is, what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Yeah. Oh, I would say recycle setbacks and failure. That's one of the most important lessons that I've learned in my life is don't expect everything to go how you want it to go. Understand that adversity is coming, that there's going to be challenging situations, but they don't have to paralyze your forward progress. You can recycle every failure, every setback, every moment of trial and tribulation and use it as fuel for your future. Because again, that's how I started buckling down in school. I was a failing student. College was not on my radar. But once I started to see that I can be a good student in school, I started to use that to fuel me moving forward. And that story about how I was able to go from a 0.75 GPA to a PhD, that that's what fueled me throughout the entire process. Because for me, I knew that there were going to be young people who had a similar lived reality as I had, where they didn't believe that they were capable of achieving at a high level and that they would have to learn to recycle the setbacks. You can't get too down on yourself when it doesn't go your way. You can't feel this sense of defeatedness when you fail, but you have to use that disappointment to fuel your future. So you got to recycle every challenge and just keep moving. Use it as fuel to keep pressing.
And thanks for sharing that. And that's a great reminder to everyone that we don't have to stop at failure. As you mentioned, we can refuel it, use it as fuel to press forward and stay encouraged on what we want to accomplish. And realize that life may not always happen as how we want it. And
Mhm.
once you have that in mind, if you experience failure or setbacks, you will realize that that's not the end of the journey,
Mhm.
but you can keep pressing forward if you choose to. But you first have to realize that things may not always go as planned.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that reminder. I think everyone can benefit from that, because on this journey of life, it doesn't matter where you are in life. Sometimes things may not go as planned.
Mhm.
And you have to realize that you don't stop because it's not going as how you want it. but you press forward regardless of the challenges that you are experiencing. So my next question is, before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support the great work that you're doing to make a difference?
Yeah, my website is purposepushers.com. So if anyone is trying to contact me or see the events that I might have going on or the books that I've written or any of the merchandise that I produce, they could go to purposepushers.com. They can also find me on all social media platforms at Purpose Pushers. So that's where I can be found.
Okay, so Facebook, LinkedIn,
Facebook,
Instagram.
LinkedIn, Instagram, yes, Twitter, any of those platforms. It is just at Purpose Pushers.
Okay, okay. I will make sure I put it somewhere in the description so they can reach out to you and support the work that you're doing, because the work that you're doing, man, is really important and it's needed. So for people to support you, I'll definitely put it in the description. And it doesn't matter how motivated we are. I like to tell people we always need support from others. So I'll
Absolutely.
make sure that is there so the listeners can reach out to you whenever they want to. My final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
Oh man, that's it. I actually talk about this question all the time. I often tell my wife that I know what I want people to say at my eulogy. I know what I want to be remembered for. I want every human being that I ever encounter in life to be able to say that this gentleman inspired me, helped me believe in myself, made me more confident, and encouraged me along the journey. I want everyone to say that I use my time wisely and I live with a sense of purpose and I was crazy about transforming my community. That's what I want to be remembered for.
Man, that's great. And if you do that, you have done your job, because what we're here for, man, is to serve others. And
Yes.
once we realize that our time on earth is of service, then we will do our job for being here. Know that we're here to make a difference. Know that we're here to help others to make a difference. And know that we're here to make the impact that can help transform our world. We will do ourselves justice, or do the creator, do God justice, because it's about God placed the greatness in us for a
Yes.
purpose.
Yes.
And so once we realize that, we didn't get what we have within just to have it.
Yes, sir.
And I think the best thing that we can do to really show God that we appreciate life is to impact others positive way. Because, man, outside of that, it's like you just live it. You
Yep.
have to live for a reason, for a purpose.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think once we do that, I think, our time here on earth, it would be justified to
Absolutely.
make a difference in the lives of others. So, man, it's great talking to you, having a conversation. Man, you have shared some really great points and insights that I believe is beneficial to all of us, to the listeners. So again, Dr. Taylor, man, thanks for being here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, sir, for having me. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Full speed ahead, sir. Thank you.
Man, it's a pleasure. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well. Listeners, as always, please continue to support us here on the Black Male Impact. Our goal is to inspire positive change, and with your support, we will continue to do the work that matters. Thanks again for being with us here on the Black Male Impact.